Resume. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, maybe, from where you're coming from. My name is Ben Cornett, and I'm your moderator for today's webinar. I know there's a few people still on our webinar and still joining, so we'll give it a couple more minutes before we get started to talk about recruitment tech trends to watch for 2021. Again, thank you for joining. In just another minute, we'll get started here. Again, just good morning to those still joining. My name is Ben Cornett, and we're grateful for you to join our webinar today, Recruitment Tech Trends to Watch for 2021. Another minute or two, we'll get started. The chat is open. Maybe take a moment as you're joining us this morning. Tell us where you're joining from, and we're really excited to have everyone join us today. Again, we'll get started in just a couple minutes. Awesome. It looks like we already have people from all over the country. We see Dallas and Boston and Michigan and Texas and California. Again, my name is Ben Cornett. Welcome to our webinar this morning, Recruitment Tech Trends to Watch for 2021. This is brought to you by Verified First, iCIMS, and Aptitude Research. And we're going to give just one more minute. We have quite a few people still logging into the webinar, so one more minute, we'll get going. Well, awesome. I want to respect everyone's time, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, good morning. My name is Ben Cornett. I'm your moderator for today's webinar, and my role is really to kind of watch our time and hopefully give us time for questions at the end for our panelists today. Today, we're going to be talking about recruit tech trends to watch for in 2021. As you all know, and the world's changed as we know it when it comes to HR technology and your roles and everything we're doing. Just a couple of housekeeping items. We are recording today's webinar. So that, for whatever reason, you want to share this with your team, you can do that. Also, we will put a copy of the webinar, the slides that you'll be seeing today, into a document that you can share. I do want to call out our partnership with Verified First and iCIMS. We're grateful for the sponsors for today's webinar. And of course, for our guru of gurus at Aptitude Research, we're going to meet in just a second. One other housekeeping item, the chat window is open throughout the webinar. So as we go, if you have any questions or concerns or comments, and maybe a good test of this, make sure you can hear me, type 1. The chat is open throughout the webinar, of course, and we'll try to take as many questions as we can at the end of the webinar. Today, I'm really happy to introduce to all of you, and maybe some of you already know the infamous Madeline Laurano. Madeline, are you there? Good morning. Good afternoon, I guess. You're in Boston.
Yes. Hi, it's great to be here. I'm jealous of everyone on the call that's in these warm weather areas like Orlando and Texas, because we are about 20 degrees and snowstorm heavy here in Boston. So great to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Madeline Laurano is the founder of Aptitude Research. And Madeline, maybe before we get going too far, you want to take just a moment and introduce Aptitude Research, what you guys are all about there?
Absolutely. So at Aptitude Research, we do research on human capital management. Talent acquisition is a big focus for the research that I do. We do a lot of major surveys each year. We did 3 major surveys this year because there's so much change. And we also do a lot of interviews with organizations to really learn what they're going through. So I'll be sharing some of the research that we saw this year during the call.
Awesome. And then also we have joining us today, Jewell Parkinson. I hope I don't butcher your name, Jewell. So good morning, good afternoon. You're on the East Coast, I think, as well. So good afternoon.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here with you. Similar to Madeline, I'm here on the East Coast enjoying the cold weather and the recent snow, and I'm very excited to participate in today's webinar. So thank you.
Awesome, awesome. And Jewell, I know you're somewhat new with the iCIMS organization, but maybe a little bit about your role with iCIMS and paint a picture for our audience today.
Yes, thank you. I've recently started with iCIMS as Chief People Officer, and looking forward to working with a great talent platform. As you know, the purpose of our focus is on engaging, hiring, and advancing great talent and helping organizations transform their workforces. So enjoying my time.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And I know, for everyone in our audience, Jewell and Madeline, it's been a strange year and there's been a lot of changes and a lot of disruption maybe in some cases. And, I'm in the office and I think there's 4 of us in the entire office here today. And when we go out of our little office, we wear a little mask everywhere we go and we try to not get too close to people. So hopefully, we hope that our audience gets a lot out of the webinar today. And we know that there's a lot of change and Madeline's done a really good job in some of the research that they've done. So I'm going to kind of step out with a little bit and monitor the chat a little bit, Madeline, if you want to take us through today's agenda and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. So thank you all for joining today. I know it's been quite a year and you've all been through so much change. Every organization is going through some type of transformation today. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that we've all gone through change. Your jobs have become much harder as you're looking to adjust and adapt to this new world we're living in. And I've said this last year, but I think it's really important to repeat again this year. This is an amazing industry to be in. You're driving so much change within your organizations. You have such an impact on this idea of future of work and how you're impacting your candidates and your employees. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that before we start talking about some of the trends we're seeing. I think the other thing that I'll say is often at the end of the year, and Ben, I know we probably talked about this before too, we've done a lot of predictions webinars, right? We look to the future and we talk about predictions for next year. This year is a little bit different because I think we're all sick of predictions and we're sick of trying to pretend we know what's next. What we're really going to talk about are some of the trends that we're seeing in the research, in the market. Jewell's had a lot of experience with clients and seeing different trends play out. And instead of trying to predict what's going to happen, we're really going to focus on, in many cases, going back to the basics and how we can think about these trends to drive us and prepare us for next year. So we're gonna talk about the current state of talent acquisition. Ben, I know you've seen a lot of verified first too that has been driving this change.
Yeah, and I think it's really, I like to call out because everyone on our webinar has done so much. I mean, I see that in our organization, right? As an employee of a company that, manages, we're about 180 employees and, everyone's now remote. It's just so different. And the hiring process and everything going, I think there's probably 30 employees I've never ever seen. I've never ever met, other than something like a video conference. So definitely a lot of interesting trends there.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's happening today, what we're seeing with all this change this year. We're going to talk about some of the trends that keep coming up again and again about technology and how it's become too complex for many organizations. And then we'll follow it up with some recommendations.
Awesome.
I'm not going to bore anyone with our methodology, I promise. It just gives you some context as we share some of the results that we found in our survey and through the qualitative interviews. We do a lot of global studies, so you can get a little sample here, and I can certainly answer any questions in the chat or in the Q&A about the research methodology. So Ben, Jewell, let's talk about the current state. It has been quite a year, and we've all seen that. And we had a big conversation about this specifically before we did this webinar and started talking about ideas for this webinar. And we talked about how we're all seeing hiring has, in many cases just shifted. I think there's this idea that when we're in a time of uncertainty, talent acquisition stops and everything shuts down. And companies are certainly going through hiring freezes or they're shifting a little bit. But we all talked about how that's not necessarily the case we're seeing. We're seeing shifts in priorities, shifts in expectations. But for many organizations, over 60%, they're still hiring.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially 2020 has been rather volatile. So we saw sort of peaks and valleys, especially earlier in the year in Q1 when businesses were really assessing and really responding to what was occurring. But as you mentioned, what our most recent iCIMS Insight report showed is that for the month of November in 2020, we actually see job openings up 10% higher year over year. So certainly hiring activity is underway.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I think, a lot of companies I'm talking to, they're all of a sudden now in Q4, it's ramping up like crazy. I just talked to a company yesterday and they're hiring more in Q4 than they did in all of 2019. So it's certainly a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and I think, Madeline, from the Verify First angle and what we see in like the screens, right? What we see in the process is the background screens. And, initially when COVID hit, we saw the number decline a little bit, but it was less than 30 days before the number started declining again. And we are up year over year compared to last year. So I think, the data shows us, and, it's consistently a story that companies are still hiring. They did shift what they're hiring and how they're hiring, but at the end of the day, they are still hiring.
Yeah, it's continuing. And I think that's very, very positive. And with those shifts, there are new challenges that have certainly come up, and I think we're all familiar with those this year. But we just want to launch our first poll, and we're going to ask all of you, what are some of the challenges that you are seeing at your organization this year? Is finding and attracting quality hire? Is it thinking about remote recruitment? Is it thinking about changes during the pandemic? Communicating with candidates has obviously been a big challenge, especially in a remote world. Implementing new technology. 44% of companies are still implementing new technology, and then measuring the effectiveness of your TA efforts. So we'll leave this up for a minute, and Jewell and Ben, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are and companies you're talking to on what you think some of the challenges might be here as we get the results in.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly COVID has exposed a number of challenges, both in terms of business processes. So, realizing and bringing light to some antiquated business processes, frankly, and also technology gaps. So I think going through this experience has really helped reveal those. And also really thinking about how do we, account for the growth in talent acquisition. So we have dozens of small vendors who might lack some of the scale and experience to really help in that area. But on the other side, we may have some larger legacy vendors who frankly sometimes see TA as an afterthought. So there's not always that innovation and investment there. So I think some of the challenges definitely been in the exposure of the gaps on the business process and technology side.
Yeah,
and I think, from our angle, Jewell, to go with that, technology is obviously a gap, and I think we've seen a lot of people adapt to, being able to be a little bit different or innovative with technology. But on the other gap, what we see is that quality of hire is more important than ever. Making sure you get the right person for the right role, because, quite frankly, we're not in a situation. I think where we can get wrong. It's just too fast. In some roles. Probably even more specifically in the healthcare roles, we just can't get it wrong. We don't have the time to get it wrong. And so we see that quality hire continue, at least on our end, to be a top priority. And let me go ahead and end the poll and share the results here and see what we get. I think that came across.
Yeah.
Any surprises?
Yeah.
Madeline, you've seen all the data before.
Yeah, and I'll share right now what we saw in our research, and it really aligns with this. Finding and attracting quality of hire, it was a priority and a challenge before the pandemic, and now certainly it continues to be one. And I think, there's a comment here from Helene that says that retail is impacted too. So I think, Ben, to your point, it's healthcare, it's retail, it's these industries where you can't get quality wrong. And the challenge we see is that it's not just having the talent available, it's being able to really define what quality of hire means, measuring it, and then thinking about the technology that impacts that. And, Jewell, to your there's so many different solutions out there, so many startups, and so few of them really have an impact on quality of hire.
Yeah, and I think also when you think about how, a company in terms of exposing our culture to attract those high quality hires, we had to think a little bit differently about how we actually present our brand and present our culture to people, given that, we don't have the traditional ways of bringing them on site, getting them to somewhat experience the organization, the values in a traditional way. So being able to use, some newer technologies, video platforms. So for example, at iCIMS, we just announced last week an acquisition of a company, Altru, that will allow our customers to be able to showcase their brand identities through videos that are created by employees. So this is just, another way in which necessity has led to different opportunities in terms of how we present our brand and tell our story to hopefully attract quality hires.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are the new challenges. I think quality of hire has been a consistent, but thinking about remote recruitment, thinking about this world that we're living in with the pandemic and new priorities that certainly change the challenges talent acquisition is facing. With that, we're also seeing new responsibilities. I know that there's certainly a lot of discussion around the TA function and what that needs to look like at organizations, but there's lots of influencers and there's lots of specialists now within the TA function that certainly have a say in technology and the technology companies are using and how these solutions are getting adopted. Jewell, Ben, are you seeing this in some of these roles kind of play out in how you're working with clients?
Yes, absolutely. I think also the increased role of trying to tell our story, so the storytelling element, and also personalizing the experience for candidates in a way that allows us to attract and engage based on the things that are important to the individuals that we're actually looking to attract and engage. So certainly that has become important in the role of talent acquisition as well.
Yeah, and I think from our angle, what we see really is the connection to our business partners being more and more important. Like our integration with iCIMS and the partnership that we have with iCIMS is something that we value very highly, and hence why we're working together, because that partnership that enables people to do is have a better experience for the recruiter, have a better experience for the candidate, and obviously connecting the employer's brand to the experience of them going through a background check. An example is, they send a notification to John because John is a new hire. And, if you can't put your custom branding on that notification, that whole branding experience kind of disappears. So those are little things, little ways that we touch this, but definitely, that's where we see the new responsibilities to make sure that, we're delivering the best solution for users.
Yeah, and that experience is front and center. So it's, every aspect of the business is exposed to that and they can see that. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
So new challenges, new responsibilities, and then new priorities. And, I think some of these priorities certainly for some organizations have certainly been an area of focus over the past few years. But, over this year, we're seeing a huge focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, thinking about automation, thinking about remote recruitment, and thinking about communication. There's so much around candidate experience, but to me, all of these elements are the candidate experience, right? It's diversity, equity, and inclusion is a big part of the candidate experience. Automation is a tool for the candidates to be able to move faster through the process. Remote recruitment and thinking about how we're going to make candidates feel safe and included and going through a fair process are all parts of this candidate experience. So, I think for a lot of organizations that weren't focused on these areas, they absolutely have to be for this year and then moving on to next year and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the expectations of candidates certainly are changing and evolving as well. And so communication, as you mentioned, is really key throughout the process. I mean, even if it's a situation where the individual didn't get the role, there is still an expectation, of course, that there will be proper communication. And so creating sort of a multi-touch strategy where there's different channels and modes to communicate to be as effective as possible with your applicant pools, very important. And especially as you've touched on the diversity and inclusion side, I mean, this is where we have the opportunity on how we show up as an organization, whether it's through career site, leveraging technology through video. It's an opportunity for us to expand our reach into different communities and to broaden the interest in our organizations. And we know that more diverse organizations are higher performing, collaborative, more engaging. So this is certainly something that's top of mind for all of us.
Yeah. And I think you're going to go into this, Madeline, but this really translates into, okay, what are recruiters doing today, right? How are they dealing with all this right now? What's their role look like? You know, we see the comment from Robert is that we see TA leaders' roles are shifting and changing. So really no surprise there. But I think, you know, when you think about the actual, what the recruiter does day to day, there's definitely an impact. And, you know, new priorities drive really new roles probably.
Yeah, and I think it also, you know, we're talking about tech trends today, and it also impacts how we think about investing in our tech providers. These all need to be parts of the evaluation when we're looking at our tech partners, and they all need to be areas where we're pushing our technology partners to help us drive results in too. You know, and I think that, you know, as you're thinking about what your priorities are, really thinking about the technology you're using and the technology you're evaluating and how some of these priorities are going to be influenced, hopefully in a positive way with that. So a lot of change, we've talked about a lot of change, but also, and Ben and Jewell, I know we've talked a lot about this too, still some of the same fundamental challenges for the talent acquisition function. We ask where recruiters are spending their most time. And even in all this change, all the transformation, recruiters are still spending most of their time scheduling calls, scheduling interviews, finding candidates in the ATS, doing really administrative tasks that take away from building those relationships, that take away from all of those priorities we just looked at: diversity, equity, inclusion, communication, building, you know, better automation in the technology that we're using. So it's a really interesting spot I think we're in right now, where change is happening, and yet we still face many of the challenges within talent acquisition that we have for years.
Yeah, I agree, and I think this goes back to sort of the exposure of the pain points of the many of the administrative, routine, transactional tasks that traditionally recruiters have been accountable for. And when we think about how key automation is, and we're talking a lot about new technologies, but really about shifting, how do we streamline and shift some of that work through the help of, you know, automated assistance. And if we think about technology such as AI and how that has the ability to streamline some of these responsibilities, in addition to helping to provide sort of a voice to the career site, helping to navigate applicants through the process, and basically just streamlining a lot of that more manual work that traditionally recruiters have taken on. So this is an opportunity, I think, to utilize innovative technologies like AI and like chatbot in order to really help us work smarter and, frankly, free up the recruiters to be able to engage in those more strategic and high impact parts of their work that they certainly want to and are doing.
I'll say too, we've just gone back to the chatbot conversational AI piece. We found that 7% of companies were investing in conversational AI last year, and it's up to 38% this year. So I think it speaks to just that. There needs to be support in this remote world. So the other challenge, you know, I think talent acquisition is still burdened with so many administrative tasks. But, you know, and Jewell, you alluded to this in the beginning of the webinar as well. The TA landscape has become way too complex. We have some traditional providers that are looking to get into new areas and offering new capabilities. Startups seem to emerge every other week in this space, and it can become incredibly overwhelming. We found that 51% of companies have 3 or more ATS systems in place. For some companies, they don't even know what business units might be using some of those ATS systems. 66% are using 3 or more primary sourcing solutions, and 70% are using 3 or more job boards. So there's so much excitement happening in TA tech right now. You know, it's an area I feel very passionate about, but at the same time, I think it's become too overwhelming for a lot of companies. And when we look at the tech stack that we have, you know, we're not often seeing the results. You know, we found that, you know, even recruitment marketing is one example. I know a lot of companies are investing in that right now. Only 2% of companies are using all of the functionality in those platforms. So it's really, I think, a challenge for companies today is thinking about this tech landscape.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of our research shows that on average, most companies are dealing with 9 or more different applications that they're really trying to connect and integrate to present a more seamless experience. And that has at times been a challenge. And so really thinking about, where are companies looking for talent? I mean, larger companies, they're increasing in some respects their dependence on contingent labor, which could also add more complexity to hiring based on the type of employment that you're looking for, location strategy, competencies, skills, etc. As well as we're grappling, many organizations, with the fact that internal talent is also looking to explore new roles. So how do you both present an external and internal experience that allows you to advance and grow internal talent while also bringing in the best and brightest external talent within a landscape that is touching multiple applications. So very challenging and complex to grapple with.
And I think, Madeline, to add to this is, and this is maybe putting you on the spot a little bit, is more of a question that I have, this is obviously tech is complex, but why is it that companies continue to use so many multiple systems? Is it because of lack of technology integration? Is it because of lack of, experience, training, know-how? Is it, is there any kind of research you guys have done around why that is? Just curious.
Yeah, it's such a great question. It's a couple things. So, and we ask why companies are replacing, why they're investing, and we kind of dig into all of that. And it comes down to integration is a big piece. We're going to talk about that now, is we're investing in technology to solve specific problems. And oftentimes those systems don't integrate. So the response is not necessarily to go back to the basics and figure out how to make them work. It's to look at what else we can use and invest in to be able to solve that challenge. So the tech landscape gets more and more complex the more that the systems we have aren't working together and aren't communicating. The other challenge is, I think the market is very confusing, and I don't think that's necessarily the fault of the organizations that are making these decisions. I think it's the fault of the market. I think what we try to do in the research we do is provide some clarity around this really complex market. For so long, it was just ATSs and background screening and job boards. Ben, this. It was like, that's your bread and butter. And it worked because it was simple. And now we have all these other areas which create new opportunities for brand and workforce planning. And I see, Helene says internal mobility, and that's a huge area of technology right now for companies. But we have to really think about what areas are delivering results and what we're actually going to be adopting. And integration is a really big part of that. So that certainly comes down to some of the trends we're going to see here. I think what's interesting, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, is so often we think about what's next. And I see that with a lot of organizations today. We're planning for the future. So we have to think about innovation. We have to look at what's next. And oftentimes we're not pushing pause and saying, let's look at what doesn't work. And let's look at, what drives success. And I think when we get into the trends right here in a minute, that's really what we're going to talk about. And in some ways, it's really back to the basics, right? It's thinking about how to approach our TA tech stack and how to approach technology in a way that's really delivering results.
And Madeline, really quick, so as far as measuring our ROI, are these the findings, across the board? Are they the same for kind of the SMB, the smaller organizations versus that mid-market versus enterprise? Or do enterprise do a better job of measuring ROI? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's really across the board. And you would think that enterprise, would do a better job because it's a longer sales cycle. It's a longer process. When you're going to invest in technology, it's over a year typically. But it's amazing to me how often ROI is not thought about in advance. It's something that's thought about 3 years later, 4 years later. And at that time, we're not really clear about why we made this investment to begin with, and we're not necessarily looking at the right ROI. When we talk about that in a minute, my recommendation is to think about ROI even before you start talking to your organization. And it doesn't mean creating some complicated algorithm or calculation for it. It means really starting to take down the benefits and the costs and the time frame when you want to see results. And if you're working with the right partner and provider, they're going to be able to help you with that ROI. They're going to be able to have some templates and some tools to support that. Jewell, does that kind of, I know you've worked with a lot of companies throughout your career and thinking about ROI.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely, you're spot on in my experience as well. And I think it's important that, as you say, as we're navigating digital transformation, that we not lose sight of the basics and really trying to make sure we optimize our investment and get that ROI. And some of the KPIs that, you know, we've identified, which with this audience, I'm sure many are familiar, but, you know, candidate satisfaction, how do we measure their experience in the process, the sourcing of hiring, cost to recruit, time to fill, quality of hire. And so these are all, you know, the types of metrics that we want to make sure that we are able to have transparency to, and that we're able to measure to achieve the outcomes, you know, that we want strategically. So absolutely.
So should we start talking about some of these trends?
Yes.
These, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's good.
You know, I think people are so used to predictions at the end of the year, you know, we're gonna start talking about self-driving cars and blockchain and all these areas. And what I really like about this presentation and what we're going to talk about is really figuring out what works, taking a step back before we look ahead and talking about some of the trends that we were seeing this year. So our second poll, we're going to launch it and we're going to ask you, what areas of TA tech are you looking to replace in the next year, if any? Maybe you're not. But, you know, is it your ATS? Is it your CRM or your recruitment marketing platform? Any onboarding system? Any assessments? Background screening? Interviewing has been a big area for companies for obvious reasons this year, or no replacement. So, any guesses, Ben or Jewell?
Well, I think it's interesting. You know, not all the not all the options are here. I just saw in the chat from Tiffany. You know, compensation management platform. You know, is something she's probably looking at. So, you know, I think we need to recognize that there might be others that aren't on here, but nonetheless, it's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, certainly ATS and CRM, some of those, seen a lot of those bundled together in terms of priority, especially as you're looking to, you know, maybe build talent pools and keep in touch with candidates over a longer duration. So we're seeing that.
And I think
we got about
ability too, you know, for, you know, to your point, that's a great way to think about your internal talent as well.
Well, let me go ahead and share the results here, Madeline, so they have them up on the screen. And, you know, I know we're going to go into some of these probably, but any surprises stand out?
You know, and it's not surprising thinking about everything going on, but I love to see onboarding as one of the top ones here as well, because I think what we're seeing in this remote world is that we can't just have an onboarding approach where we wait for someone to come into the office on the first day and, you know, not have anything available for them. And I think, Ben, you know this better than I do, but there's really an experience that starts with screening and extends all the way to onboarding. And we need to think about the technology that supports that and, you know, enables that.
Yeah, and quite frankly, I think that experience, it doesn't go just through onboarding. I think it goes from, you know, initial contact with the recruiter from a brand experience all the way through when they're out in the community and they no longer work for the organization. You know, so really, I think when I think of onboarding, I think of that whole picture experience. But that's me with a marketing mind because that's how I think. But I think that's an interesting, you know, an interesting point.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I take off my my chief people officer hat and just put on my recent new hire hat, just having personally being able to appreciate that continuity of experience from completing the application to going to the background screening to the interview process and then starting with an onboarding experience that really felt contiguous. So and it was and it really presented and reinforced the message I think the company wants to convey to a new hire in terms of keeping them engaged. So yeah, all of this.
And I think there's two parts to that, you know, onboarding as well, is that there's the forms piece. And I see a comment here about the document management component, and then that engagement too, to make sure that that experience is engaging for new hires. So we're going to talk about some of the trends that we're seeing. And, you know, it's interesting because certainly as the TA tech stack becomes more complex, I think what's really been very obvious to a lot of organizations is that the ATS in the very traditional sense is not enough. We need to think about a way to engage with talent even before they apply, and then provide an experience, you know, Ben, to your point, even after onboarding. So we're going to talk a little bit about the modern tech stack and how we can simplify it for you today. Companies are reevaluating success, what that looks like, And again, I think what we've really focused on as organizations is speed, right? We want change. We want to think about the future of work. We want to think about innovation. And in doing so, that speed often comes at the expense of delivery, at delivering results, at seeing what success looks like. So if we can kind of push pause and ask internally, what does success look like? And sometimes that's looking at what you have in place and what you've used in the past, asking key stakeholders to say, you know, when we have technology that we really like, that works, what is it about that makes it successful? So it's really reevaluating that success. The view of the candidate experience is changing, internal mobility. We spent some time talking about that, but that's a huge part of it. We have to think about a broader look at this candidate experience. We're going to talk a little bit about training, and this is especially true for diversity, equity, and inclusion. You know, what's happened this year is we're seeing this as the #1 priority. And when we look at our research, what are companies doing to address this? It's just training. And training to me is just a checkbox, right? It's just saying, okay, we tackled diversity, equity, and inclusion because we offered a training session and we're going to offer it again next quarter. And it doesn't really get at the root of our challenges with talent acquisition. So we need to really look at the technology we're using and the strategies that we have in place. And then, you know, Ben, to our conversation earlier, integration is so important. You know, I think it's something, you know, we found in our research, companies think about after they've evaluated their providers. Why not ask these questions way in advance, even before we start to look at our providers? What is the integration strategy? Is there flexibility around it? How can we get IT involved early? If IT isn't going to be a partner to us, what options do we have? How can our vendor support us through that? So we're going to share a little bit about all of these areas. So let's talk about the tech stack. And I know we've all had conversations about this, and it seems to be changing and evolving all the time. The point that I want to make here is that we call it the trifecta. It's the recruitment, marketing, CRM, the ATS, and the onboarding. For organizations, that piece is in place. You need something to attract talent. You need an ATS to serve as your workflow, and you need some type of onboarding system. Then there's an ecosystem that's going to be different for every organization. You know, certainly, you know, I see some comments about conversational AI and chatbots. For some organizations, that's incredibly important. Thinking about internal mobility, thinking about employer branding, background screening, you know, is the biggest area of investment we found in our research, with over 80% of companies using background screening providers. And then there's an experience layer too, to think about what does this experience look like and how can it be consistent from the time that somebody first learns about our organization to the time they join and become an employee. And Jewell and Ben, anything that kind of comes up when you see this, or how organizations are kind of thinking about this tech stack today?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on it, and it's really a part of the experience layer. Maybe on top is that personalization, right? And leveraging some of these advanced technologies to create a more personal touch point with individuals. And also when you think about, you know, tying in the D&I comment from before into the interview process, and how can we help eradicate biases that might be built into the process, whether it's based on a job profile or how we're interviewing, et cetera. So I think that personalization, as well as just getting more intelligent with eradicating things like bias out of the process itself.
Yeah, and doing that early.
You know, and Jewell, maybe a question for you, Jewell, and I know this might be kind of off the cuff and you can't answer it, that's okay. You know, when you think about personalization, and, you know, what you all do at iCIMS is pretty impressive, you know, with some of the SMS capabilities you have and some of the other capabilities, obviously with video that now you get acquired. How, you know, where a lot of employers, we're finding a lot of employers don't get to meet their employees in today's world, right? Not as often as they normally would. And how do you make that a personal experience if you can't shake their hand and you can't, you know, open the door for them, or, you know, those kind of things that we traditionally see in the office in the employer setting. How do we solve for that? I mean, what is iCIMS doing that's interesting around that idea?
Well, I think it is about personalization and the human touch almost at scale. I mean, again, using my own personal experience, 6 weeks in, I've not met one colleague in person, not my direct reports, not my organization, not my boss. And, you know, what I have experienced firsthand in that regard is where the technology really helps create a level of engagement and connection with bringing forth the values of an organization through different methods, whether it be especially video and in terms of getting to see the look and feel of the organization through different parts of the organization. And a lot of it is just personal, authentic connections and stories that really make you feel connected. You mentioned text. That's another way I think is a part of that whole multi-touch strategy, trying to engage people where they are and what's going to be to most resonate with them in terms of the way they like to communicate. So both of those methods, mobile, video, text, these are ways that I think companies are getting better at leveraging to promote their brand and to keep people engaged. So.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, Madeline, this kind of maybe as a call out, you got some kid art behind you. And, I think that's kind of a way that, at least Verify First, when we first went to a remote workforce, which isn't normal for us as an organization, we went from no one wanted to share their video cameras to, okay, it's not a bad idea, share your video. And, as a dad of a little 5-month-old baby, I get to bring my baby to, it makes it personal too. I know that's not a work experience, but that's a way that as a team internally, we've found ways to get to know our people better. Like, I think I know, on my team, Jess and Liv and some of the others on my team much better now because we're not face to face. Like, I get to see their dogs and I get to hear their life go on. So I think that's really, really interesting, to think about.
Yeah. And I think it's important to communicate that to candidates too, because as you're going these video interviews for candidates, you want to make them feel comfortable too. It's not going to be a big deal if their 10-year-old kid walks through the door and interrupts the call. You want to make them feel comfortable. You want to make sure that they know that this is part of the work that we live in today. So I think that's, I'm hearing more and more examples of that too, as people go through these interviews and, we don't have this expectation that candidates can't have any conversation about their personal life. We want to see it.
Yeah, it's so interesting that for years we've been talking about whether we use the terminology work-life balance or work-life integration. And it always seemed rather theoretical in large part, right? Like something we were trying to solve. And it feels like in this current state, we've actually realized it. We've achieved that work-life integration in a way that maybe we didn't expect, because you do see the children, you see the spouses, the doorbell is ringing, the dog is barking, this is life. And we're experiencing it more real time than I ever thought we probably would, absent the pandemic. So.
I don't know about you guys, but I actually enjoy it. Like, I enjoy that I get to get up because all of a sudden my baby's crying, right? I enjoy, as a father, that's part that I enjoy. I've never had that experience in any other, role in my 25 years of career. It's really been nice to be home with my wife when that happens.
Yeah, I think it's too. So this shows you the research that we did on replacement, and a little bit different. And I think maybe it's even a sign of kind of where we're at in the year, that more companies are looking at some of these areas like screening to onboarding, where, we have to think about what happens with this remote world and interviewing and onboarding our new hires. So we saw a lot of replacement happening earlier in the talent acquisition process. But I'm curious to see what we're going to get next year, because I imagine it's going to align more with all of you on the call today. So a lot of the trends that we've been talking about and we'll continue to talk about for the remainder of our time here today is around efficiency, quality, integration, and experience. And I think, we've talked a lot about quality. We're going to share a little bit more about quality of hire and how important it is today and how it's being a little bit redefined. We're going to talk about integration too, but I want to kind of call out efficiency, because I think for a lot of organizations, that's become a negative thing. Like, we don't want to talk about efficiency. We don't want to talk about time to fill as being a metric, but it is a metric, and it's an important one. And, I think for the comments here about retail and about healthcare, being able to have and understand the talent that you have available in your pipeline, to be able to move someone quickly through the process, to make sure that the interview is really standardized and moving forward so that it doesn't take a month, so that the screening process isn't leaving candidates in the dark and they have no idea what's going to happen. that onboarding is just not left, in the ether here. Efficiency is important. It's not just important for organizations, it's really important for candidates too. And I think, I just want to take a minute and talk about why efficiency has sort of gotten a bad rap here. And I think we need to change our perception around it.
Yeah, it's like going back to the point of the basics. It's one of those things that, maybe we've taken for granted, or it doesn't appear as quote unquote sexy now in this day and age. But you're spot on in terms of, especially in a digital world where things are changing so fast, the ability to simplify and the ability to scale and the ability to have speed. These are necessary prerequisites really in order to move up the stack, right? So it is about ensuring that that is there as a baseline. And then from there, it allows you to achieve the experience. It allows you to track the quality. And so I see it as very foundational, but very fundamental. And this is something that our customers are also looking at, the opportunity to simplify, whether it's a business process, whether it's how we engage with technology, but that simplicity leads to speed.
So I thought this was really interesting. We asked the metrics that matter the most this year, and we asked for HR leaders and then, business leaders within organizations too. And you can see quality of hire #1 for both. And I think that's, it goes back to the challenges that we found this year. This is what organizations care about, and every single layer of the organization cares about this, yet we still don't have a really great way of standardizing this, measuring this, defining this, and thinking about the technology that improves quality of hire. So again, I think the more that we evaluate technology for the next year, we have to think about this piece of quality. I think the other things that stand out to me here are, first, that diversity, equity, and inclusion is so low as a metric here when it's the #1 priority. So we see this as the #1 priority. And then when we think about how we're measuring this and how important it is when we're tracking what our organization is doing, it's so low for both HR and business leaders. And then, I think the candidate experience, it's something that was interesting to me because this is a priority for HR leaders, and yet it exposes the business so much. Our candidates are our customers. Our candidates are people that are talking about what their experience is like with our brand. And to me, that needs to be more of a balance.
Madeline, it's really interesting to me on the candidate experience, the idea that, CHROs, when I think senior leaders, I'm thinking CHROs or VP of HR, that's not more of a priority, because that's connected so much to, the overall brand equity and the ROI of, what that means for an organization. So that kind of, from your research, that pops out the most to me, because I think that's everything. Experience in today's world, we talk about it, you learn about it, every conference I go to has all been about that CX, right? What's that experience like? And that's really surprising. It's not more of a priority for senior leaders to me.
Yeah, I would agree with Ben. This was probably the one that I was most taken aback by, just based on the research, because again, we have a narrative, and a lot of our strategic focus is around elevating candidate experience. How do we get our brand into new markets? How do we diversify? How do we recruit in a way that attracts different channels of talent? So, personally, I've spent a lot of time in this area, really focused primarily on those two, not at the expense of the other areas, but I'm surprised that it didn't show a little higher. So.
Yeah.
So let's talk about quality of hire for a minute, because it keeps coming up over and over again in the research. I think for a lot of people on the call today, this is something that's such a priority, but such a challenge at the same time. We found, and we really tried to look at what organizations are doing to actually improve quality of hire. Where are we going to see some results so that we know that this challenge is something that we're tackling? And we saw a big difference in a couple of different areas and some of these characteristics. Companies that are invest in the right technology. So I think going back to our conversation around the tech stack, and Jewell, to your point about all these new providers kind of coming in and you have to figure out how to make sense of it all. If we're investing in the right technology, which is technology that we're going to actually use and adopt, then we're able to see a better result. using data to make the right hiring decisions. There's so much data out there. There's, you know, different data that we're collecting. And Ben, I know this is near and dear to your heart. Companies are just using the resume to make those decisions. How can we think about the data that we're collecting further down? How can we think about the screening data? How can we think about the assessment and the interview data to make that decision? And you can see companies that check in with their employees in the first of the year. So much of the quality of hire metric needs to be defined on what makes someone successful once they're already on board. So I think these are just some themes that come out, and I think they're important when we think about technology, because technology plays into all of these.
Absolutely, particularly on the front end, you think about if you have an assessment strategy and how that assessment can actually help you narrow your applicant pool and maybe target someone who will be proven to have success longer term, but then also the importance of onboarding, that initial touch point when someone comes into the organization. How do we help improve their time to productivity, their engagement, you know, through e-learning and other kinds of ways in which that we can get successful on the front end.
It's definitely valid. I think, you know, when we think about the quality of hire, you know, that's kind of, and Madeline, I know you've done some work specifically with Verified First in the past. You know, I think the number, I want to say it was organizations were 2 times, maybe it was 3 times more likely to improve their quality of hire from the data. Yeah. And so, you know, a lot of times, you know, people don't realize what background screen can do. And, you know, here at Verified First, we're starting to have conversations about, you know, a lot of employee organizations are going to open back up. You know, they're going to bring on people that maybe were furloughed, and then do you screen them again? Do you don't? And there's a lot of conversation, you know, since June in the whole HR community about what that looks like. And, you know, quite frankly, you know, the quality of hire is directly attributed to how you take care of and how you track the data behind your candidates. So it kind of re-strengthens that data. And we definitely love to look at the data and, you know, connect those dots. And it matters to organizations, especially when it comes to HR, you know, ROI that you're going to talk about later at the very end with the simple formula. But, you know, those are important.
Yeah, and it's rethinking those processes and rethinking background screening so that it's a strategic component of your talent acquisition. Data drives quality, not something that's tactical where you're just checking the box because you know you have to do it. So I think it's, you know, really important, especially today, to rethink and reframe how we think about these strategic areas. And the candidate experience is part of that. You know, I think this is really interesting to me in the research too, because so often we talk about the candidate experience, but we don't define it. And the definition has changed so much this year, right? It's changed because we have to talk about safety and we have to talk about communication. And Jewell, to your point earlier, through all of these different areas of talent acquisition. And safety is not just the physical safety of the pandemic. It's the safety of thinking about everything that's happening in our world today. And do our candidates and employees feel that they would feel safe in this work environment? Do they feel safe talking about the issues that matter to them? Do they feel safe coming to work and feeling like they're supported, that there isn't racism in their work environment? Safety is a huge area of the candidate experience that we really have not talked about until this year.
Absolutely, psychological safety, and you're spot on. This is very much a top topic for us because of everything that's going on around us in the world with the pandemic, with social unrest, and just with people trying to make it, on top of, you know, the impact of the pandemic on families, you know. So having that psychological safety is very important in terms of engaging candidates and employees alike. Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about diversity, equity, and inclusion and some of the research we found. And I alluded to it earlier, that what we see is for most companies, it's just training. And this is where we tend to focus our energy, is we're just going to train, you know, and I've worked for companies where this is the approach too. It's, we know that we want to do something and we did our employee engagement surveys and we did candidate surveys and we need to do something here. Let's do a training exercise. And oftentimes it's not necessarily even with the right person to be doing the training, but there's a training exercise and that's the end of that. There isn't really a cultural change. There isn't really an approach to talent acquisition that's going to change how we think about this. So we just kind of looked at some of these other areas, and you can see there's a lot of gaps with creating a consistent interview process where some companies are doing blinded interviews where we're really asking questions and engaging with candidates so that they all have the same experience. Where we're thinking about reducing bias very early in the talent acquisition process, where we're, really looking at some tools, whether it's around language or around, debiasing job descriptions to be able to address it early on. But to me, it's something that needs to be part of every area of talent acquisition, not just in these one-off areas.
Madeline, when we think about DEI, here verified first, we talk a lot about background screening policy. It's got to be consistent, the same for everyone. Yeah. And I think that's something organizations don't always think about. In some of the research, it shows that 38% of organizations don't even screen candidates. Or are they just making a choice to screen some candidates and others not? I think there's a place. Your policy has to be consistent across the board. You can't be, part here and part there.
Yes, and in addition to that, building on that, I think in terms of even how we develop technology, increasingly looking to have a D&I lens when it comes to product management and product development to make sure that it is built into the capability, as well as, again, this is maybe another silver lining of the current remote working environment. We have the ability to reach out beyond maybe location quarters. We can go into other states. We get in our research also more out-of-state applications, so we can broaden our reach to further diversify our workforce and build that representation, which is also an opportunity that we can do better just in terms of this current time.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think the other thing I'd add on to that is AI becomes a big conversation within this too. I think so often there's two perceptions. One is that AI does reduce bias, and one is that it doesn't. It contributes to it. And I think we have to be very careful of the providers that we're evaluating in this area. Do they have ethical AI? Are they going to be transparent about that, both to the employer and to the candidate? So there's an understanding. And I think to me, it's still a work in progress when it comes to technology in these areas, but being able to work with providers that are going to be transparent with you and ethical around this is really important. Absolutely. So integration, I know we spent some time talking about this already, and I mentioned, we found that so few companies think about this in advance. Think about integration early. It's truly an important area when you're investing in technology. It's such an area where problems can arise. And we found that, we did a lot of research, and I can share it with anyone that's interested, on issues with IT, issues with your provider, and, issues with, and I know both of you have to deal with this, competing providers having to integrate with each other to work with a certain company. So I don't know if you have any kind of experience or recommendations you'd give to companies on this integration layer, but I think it's really important.
Yeah, I think, verify first, we really want to integrate the way the customer wants to integrate. When you think about integration, if I were a CHRO sitting somewhere, or a director of IT that's stopping that decision, and we're talking about complex integration models that go on a roadmap and take months to years, then you have to ask yourself, is what I'm getting really what I want? And is that the right kind of integration? And we need to realize that there are other methodologies. And fortunately with iCIMS, we've built both of worlds. So we've got the API integration to the Prime connector, or we can integrate via browser extension. And what that enables customers to do is to make the choice that's right for them. And I think, Jewell, we talked about this, last week a little bit. It's really about the customer experience at the end of the day. When we think about our clients using our platforms, it's about what kind of experience can we deliver that's going to give them the most benefit to solve their business problems.
Absolutely. And I think this is where, and Ben, you spoke on this, where partnership is so key, having the right partners to be able to create those experiences. Yeah.
So I know we're kind of running here at the end, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I think we'll go to the recommendations. I think the point that I'd make here is really, you just want to think about a partner. And it's so important with technology today. There's so many different trends, out there. There's so much, in terms of startups kind of coming into this market. You want to look at the full picture of the provider, the company, the product, the differentiators, and you want to be able to have these conversations around ROI early in the process. I've heard companies that do journaling, just journal, take note of the benefits of the costs that come up with, technology in your company. Think about what would drive success. What type of time frame are you looking at? And just start to take note. Just start there. Just journal. Just take notes about what success looks like and start your ROI there. Any true partner will work with you on that process. So let's wrap it up, Ben and Jewell, here with some recommendations. I'll start with just identifying those unique requirements. I think every company is going through some type of different challenge at some different stage of transformation. There's so much to get distracted by when you look at other companies out there. Really think about what is important to your organization, what unique requirements that you have.
Yeah, I think when I'm thinking about looking for, I was going to say, Jewell, when I think about looking for a partner, I don't want this to be a sales pitch. I want to think about how I look at things. So when I'm looking at, a vendor to solve a solution or a business problem I have, I'm looking to learn, because I don't go into it with, I already know the partner. I think you have to have an open mind and look for the partner that solves your business problems the most effective at the end of the day. And sometimes we go into those with bias. And I think it's really important that we look for the right partner that really delivers on my problem I'm trying to solve.
Absolutely. Fully agree.
Yeah. And I think one thing I'd add too is there's so many people willing to share their experience. This is an amazing industry to be in. Reach out to people. There's a lot of people sharing right now in this chat. Reach out if you're attending conferences. Use that as an opportunity to ask other people's experience, especially around implementation and integration, and have fun.
Yeah. Have fun. Fun's the most important part.
Fun
right?
is the most important one.
And I know that, we're on our time here. And, one of the things I enjoy the most about working with Madeline and Jewell is get to know where you're at. You guys got a snowstorm on, your kids are going berserk at home, Jewell, and, they want to go outside and do whatever in the snow. And, I'm just glad that we do get to have fun, that we don't have to keep our webinars all so serious, and we get to have some conversations. So really, really like that.
Me too. Thanks for having me on. It was great to be here and talk about all of this.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think if we go on the last slide, I think it's got some contact information. So for our audience, first of all, Madeline, Jewell, thank you so much for putting together and working with us on a webinar. Madeline from Aptitude Research. Your research is always valuable. I've followed it for a couple of years now. I wish I could say I followed it for 20 years. Unfortunately, 2 years ago, I switched into the space, but it's really, really good data, and it helps us as a business make better decisions. And Jewell, with iCIMS, we really appreciate the partnership and the ability we have to work together. And for our audience, thank you for taking the time. And our contact information is on here. Any questions you have, I was hoping we would have some more time for questions, but you certainly can email those or respond to the survey that you're going to get. Again, we're here for you. We appreciate everything you do. And I just want to reiterate at the very beginning, Madeline, you said this is a great group of people. This is an awesome group of people that deal with challenges in a very special way. I'm not an HR director, but I love my HR director. Zach Townsend here at Verified First is the most awesome person I've ever met. And, he's someone that cares about me, about my personal success, without really putting me in a bad spot or the organization in a bad spot. I don't know how he does it. I'm not that kind of person. But so what you guys do is just amazing. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been a privilege. I've learned a lot. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome.